Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Peter.
Episode 138, recorded on October 6th, 2021. Cloud Pod productivity is way up thanks to Facebook outage. Good evening, Jonathan. How's it going?
It's going well. It's pretty quiet here today.
Yeah, we're missing Peter and Ryan. We're not sure where Ryan's at, other than, he had a dentist appointment and then went off the radar. So hopefully he got good drugs. That's all I can say about that. Yeah.
We can hope.
We can hope. And then Peter, unfortunately, had some family drop into town, and so he is out as well. So it's just the two of us, which is fine, except for it's a very busy week of CloudPod announcements this week. So we will have to get into that pretty quickly. But nice job on getting the recording done last week. I had no doubt in your ability to get a show out while I was gone.
Well, it's the shame of not getting it done, I think, is what drove us to getting it done. So
the public ridicule that would have come your way. Yeah.
I honestly had committed to recording something myself. If nobody else had come together and done anything, I was like, damn it, I'm just going to have to record something myself. Like
just you monologuing
just
for like 30 minutes.
Yep.
I mean, listeners might like that. You never know. It's hard to say. Before we get into the show, I do want to ask if you're listening to the show and you enjoy the show, that you jump on to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the show. We do love the feedback. Or if you don't use Apple Podcasts because you're an Android person like Jonathan is, you just tell your friends about how much you love the show and how much you get out of it. And we really appreciate that, as it's always great to get those reviews and get those feedback because it helps us get rated and ranked in the Apple Podcast library, which is helpful. And, we like to do this show and we like to have you guys listen to it. And the more people who listen, the better off the show will be. So there you go. All right. Well, first up, Cloudflare has decided to get into the object storage market with their new Cloudflare R2 storage, which is an upcoming object storage service that they previewed that will offer lower pricing than existing offerings from the major cloud operators. Typically, storage services charge based not only on how much capacity a company uses, but also the amount of data it transfers to external systems, the dreaded egress cost. Cloudflare R2 will do away with the egress fee. Gasp. It will also be waiving the cost of data requests, the operations with which applications fetch information from object storage service for customers that access records infrequently. So this is in single-digit requests per second range. They will waive the fee, as well as they're offering a lower cost than the leading provider, which is AWS, at basically $0.015 per gigabyte or $15.35 per terabyte a month, which is 10% less than AWS. There's a quote here from Cloudflare. R2 will provide 99 point some god-awful number of nines, 11, I think, of annual durability, which describes the likelihood of data loss. If you could store 1 million objects in R2, you can expect to lose one once every 100,000 years, and the same level of durability as other major providers. R2 will be resistant to regional failures, replicating objects multiple times for high availability. Wow, that's the egress thing alone is huge.
It is. I mean, I think there's a little bit of marketing genius gone into this thing. They sort of pre-warned the audience the day before with, S3 hasn't had a price cut in however many years since it's been around, and we knew something important was coming. I think a bit of marketing genius. They sort of gloss over the fact that S3 has introduced infrequent access tiers and reduced redundancy tiers. I don't know. It's in itself, it's great. I think we're missing a bit of data. I mean, I think if you're storing those objects there and expecting millions of downloads at amazing performance at huge cost to Cloudflare for egress, then I think they'll probably have a salesperson knock on your door and say, yes, but you need to sign up for the enterprise plan or something like that. I mean, they're not going to give you the service for free, which is kind of how it comes across in the marketing spiel. It's like, I can store it for free and then download it as many times as I like. Yeah, I don't think it's quite that simple. I mean, what's the price to put the object there in the first place? What package do you have to sign up for to be eligible for this level of service?
Yeah, they haven't given you all the details for sure.
They certainly haven't. And it's exciting though. It's exciting because S3 needs some decent competition. And I hope that this is it. And I really hope that Cloudflare get into more powerful compute at the edge as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've seen other players come into the market, like Wasabi has come into the market. We also have Backblaze B2 storage. None of them have really seemed to make a huge dent from what I've seen, at least in the cloud spaces I've been in and people I talk to in the industry. It'll be interesting to see if Cloudflare has an opportunity here to make a difference. And it's interesting because you also look at Cloudflare getting into serverless computing. You also look at what they're already doing for DDoS and for the edge delivery, and now they're giving you this capability for data storage. Are they sort of trying to make a play on cloud computing in general, saying, look, if you're not beholden to the legacy instance-based workloads of the past, and you can do something more serverless-like, and you can do more static objects, we're actually the better cloud for you. And it's an interesting play, and it's an interesting way to attack a weak spot in Amazon's armor with the egress fees. And number two, it's also an area that, if it's really the new paradigm of computing, which everyone in serverless thinks it is, then they're in the forefront of the space right now.
Yeah, I mean, S3 paired with CloudFront has hundreds of edge locations. I'm sure Cloudflare have thousands and thousands of edge locations because they have servers in ISPs, POPs all over the world, and so they can certainly afford lower egress fees, and that moves the power of edge computing so much closer to the average consumer. I think all the focus now has been on 5G and wavelength and partnering with Verizon and things like that for the new 5G edge compute. I think what this does for Cloudflare is they're not forgetting the all us old guys who've got home PCs and laptops at home and home offices, and moving that compute closer to the vast majority of the rest of the users who aren't mobile. Yeah, I'm excited. Like I don't think I saw Cloudflare coming as a major competitor, and I agree with their. I think agree is not the right word. I think their goal of being one of the top 4 major players in cloud within a few years is quite realistic.
Yeah, I think it could be. And it's also, it puts more pressure on Amazon to lower prices, which maybe we'll finally get, because everyone's been complaining for the last 6 months or so about internet costs and AWS. So maybe we'll finally get something at reInvent this year. I can keep my fingers crossed. My wish list items. All right. Well, on Monday, you might have heard a million people scream out that they could not get to their Facebook, their Instagram, their WhatsApp pages. And that is because Facebook disappeared from the internet, just completely down. So, nicely enough, Facebook decided to host their status page, of course, on facebook.com infrastructure. So they couldn't update it. So we were left wondering for 6 hours what was going on in the world of Facebook. And Cloudflare, at least, gave us some insights before anybody else did. And we've linked to their fantastic write-up of what they saw, as well as a link to the official blog posts from Facebook as well. But basically, there was some type of update from Facebook at around 9 a.m. or so, where they basically removed all their BGP routes from the internet, which, when you do that, makes everything break. So that's a pretty horrible outage. They blame it on a configuration error they say occurred in their system, and their follow-up write-up said there was an error in their system that would have prevented this from happening. It is a little bit coincidental that the night before, the whistleblower was on 60 Minutes, and there was a lot of press about how bad Facebook was being for the world, and then magically they have a 6-hour outage the next day, which sucks up a lot of the news cycle. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's a little weird, and you almost had to wonder, is this an inside actor who did something bad? Everything from Facebook says this is just a mistake, which we'll go with them for face value if you trust Facebook. Unfortunate day for them, and HugOps was not well received in the cloud space. Actually, a lot of people were upset and were saying keep it down. Which is unusual, because normally we're very, in the Twitter space, we're very pro company operations people. But that, I still supported them. It sucks being any outage.
It does. I feel like we need the Star Wars quote about the millions of voices and the disturbance in the force. It's very interesting. The most recent post I read from Facebook goes into a little detail about the audit tool that failed because of a defect, which would normally have caught a change like this from going into production. That's fair enough. It's hard to test edge cases and things, but I think that the thing that screams out to me as making zero sense in this whole thing, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist either, but why would you take out your DNS servers? Supposedly the DNS servers realized they couldn't speak to the data centers and therefore revoke BGP routes to themselves. Why would you possibly take out the authoritative DNS for your company's domains from being accessible by the internet just because your data center was, some other data center was down? I mean, I can see removing records. That's what health checks are for. We have smart DNS anymore that data center's down. Let's take these records out of rotation. That makes all total sense. But completely cutting off the DNS for all your service domains. I just it blows my mind. I can't see any rationale for doing something like that. Which is why I'm like, maybe somebody did hit the big red panic button to cut everything off deliberately, and it wasn't quite such the accident that they claim it was. I don't know. I try not to be too tinfoil hat thing, but it makes no sense that they would cut off their DNS completely just because a data center was unavailable.
Right. And I just looking at, massive company CI/CD platforms that, we've heard from Google, we've heard from, Microsoft, we've heard from all kinds of people who are doing massive scale. And even if you had a command that removed the BGP routes in this manner, right? You typically don't do it to your entire fleet at the same time. Even if you had an audit checker and all that kind of stuff like that, you still typically do canary deployments and you make sure error rates don't increase. So, I can believe that the audit tool had an error and didn't see it, but like, you mean to tell me that you just allow complete unfettered gateway access to all of your internet connectivity with one command? Like, you don't have any type of staging of that? That kind of blew my mind in the whole thing. I'm like, again, there's a lot of things that make me feel like there may be more to the story that Facebook will not tell us. But maybe there's not, and at face value, it's a very reasonable thing. But it just feels weird to me, especially at an infrastructure of that scale and that size, that you're rolling things out at any pace that's not a slow rollout. That's slow, and and you've seen it when they've updated the homepage of Facebook. I think it took me months to get Facebook 2.0. Like, it was like, okay, someday I'm gonna get the new homepage. Not that I'm a big Facebook user, anyways. I mean, even the Cloud Pod, we're on Facebook, but no one really subscribes to us there. So, but we have it there in case someone finds us. But it's not part of my ecosystem. My wife is more into Instagram than I am, but she complained this that morning, like, I can't get onto Instagram. I'm like, yeah, Facebook's down for everybody. But the bigger impact is actually WhatsApp, because for a large portion of the world, WhatsApp is the primary method of communication. Like, you go to India, you go into different countries overseas, Argentina, and stuff like that. Like, everyone's on WhatsApp. Everybody. Mm-hmm. So to not have that communication is a huge loss, and and you had to wonder, does Facebook need to think about diversifying their backends in some ways as well, and saying, hey, should all of their DNS be inside of Facebook, or maybe they should have a third party? They can afford it. Cover, as a backup. It wouldn't have solved the BGP problem. They still would have been down, but at least, DNS wouldn't have failed in quite the same way. But, there's lots of questions that I think, I look forward to the future roadshow that they do, where they talk about the massive Monday outage and what actually happened in more detail. But there's lots of questions here, but, ultimately it's back up, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. Having to fly people across the country to break into their data centers because they had lost all remote access.
Yeah, maybe your door system to the building and your data. Maybe you should have them on a separate domain and a separate system that's isolated from the mothership.
All internal tools, no email, no nothing. It's just
craziness to me.
Very
I'm sure they've. It's gonna be a great case study for some BCP exercise in the future. Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's move on to new news in the AWS space. So first up, at reInvent 2020, they announced the preview of the Prometheus Managed Service, an open source Prometheus compatible monitoring service that makes it easy to monitor containerized application scale. And this just tells me that we are very close to reInvent 2021, because everything that got announced last year that didn't GA yet is now rushing to GA in September and October. Because no one wants to be the product that didn't actually GA before reInvent. They don't want to lap it. But with this service, you can collect Prometheus metrics from EC2, ECS, EKS, and AWS Distro for OpenTelemetry, or even other Prometheus servers as collection agents. And now it's generally available with new features such as Alert Manager and Ruler that support SNS as a receiver destination for notifications from Alert Manager. You can integrate SNS with destinations such as email, webhook, Slack, PagerDuty, OpsGenie, and VictorOps. Service supports two types of rule recording rules and alerting rules. And these rules are the same YAML format as a standalone Prometheus, which may be configured and then evaluated at regular intervals. So you now have all the great things. And you can learn more about AWS observability tools by visiting their One Observability workshop that provides a hands-on experience for you on the wide variety of tool sets AWS offers to set up monitoring and observability. And when I looked at this, I think I've lost the train on how many things they've released in this space. So there's a ton of really good content and some good labs that you can definitely check out in that particular space.
Do you think this is just a sign that Kubernetes is going to become much more important in the AWS ecosystem?
I mean, I think it has to. I mean, it's the container orchestration space for the most part. It's won most hearts and minds. I think ECS will still nibble at it. I think Fargate's, on ECS probably still has a lot of leg, to run for customers who are big AWS people. But, Kubernetes, Outpost, EKS Anywhere, all these things, like we're moving more and more to a hybrid world. And this is the only tool that can be hybrid that Amazon offers you in containers. So I think it's going to be here to stay for a while. And then if you look at the Google strategy, Google doesn't have a managed service. Great, just run a container. And so if that's your answer to all your problems, just run a container, then you can simplify a lot of sins that way.
Yeah, I have to start scratching some notes here for reinvent predictions.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this one takes a little bit to get through, and so I read it once. I think Jonathan's read it a couple times to get it to fully grok it. But AWS is announcing the availability of the AWS Cloud Control API, which is a new set of common APIs that are designed to make it easy for developers to manage their AWS and third-party services. As applications and infrastructure become increasingly sophisticated and you work across many AWS services, it becomes increasingly difficult to learn and manage distinct APIs. And the challenge is exacerbated when you also use third-party services in your infrastructure, which is my biggest complaint about Spot, actually. So this does solve some of those problems. But the Cloud Control API is a standard set of APIs to perform CRUD operations across hundreds of AWS services and dozens of third-party services. And the 5 common verbs are in use are including create resource, get resource, update resource, delete resource, and list resource, which you can then call and pass the parameters, including type and attribute of the resource you want to create. An ECS cluster or Lambda function, for example, and the input parameters are defined by a unified resource model using JSON, which everyone loves to write. Similarly, the return and types and error messages are uniform across all verbs and all resources. So today, if you were to want to describe an AWS stream, you would type in, of course, AWS Kinesis describe stream -- stream name AWS or whatever your name is of that. But now you can use AWS Cloud Control get resource -- type name AWS : Kinesis : stream -- identifier, which sounds so much easier. I mean, I just can't believe how much easier that sounds. And then AWS is apparently saying this is great for 3 different types of people. First of all, is builders who use AWS Service APIs to manage their infrastructure or customer infrastructure, leveraging low-level service APIs rather than the higher-level tools. For example, the need to list and describe all resources deployed in an AWS account, which is a very common thing you do in cost management tools, for example. This becomes difficult when outputs and API commands are all different, requiring constant development and dealing with the changes in outputs. Cloud Control gives you a single output format and simplifies the coding required, which makes a lot of sense for things like HashiCorp and others as well. Oh, which, by the way, APM partners are the number 2 group, which includes HashiCorp and Pulumi, who also happen to be launch partners of this. So prior, when AWS released a new service or feature, HashiCorp would need to learn, integrate, and test a new set of AWS Service APIs to expose in their offerings, leading to lags between release and availability. And with the new Cloud Control API, partners are able to build unique REST API code bases using unified API verbs, common input parameters, and common error types. They just have to merge the standardized, predefined, uniform resource model to interact with new AWS services exposed as REST resources. And then, of course, they say AWS customers are the third person because you're using tools like Terraform or Pulumi, and you get the benefit from the third party, which is a little bit weird. That's a weird stretch on that third one.
Yes, it is.
This is also immutable if you're using the client token parameter, so you can make sure that all of your commands are run properly. And you don't run into concurrent operation errors or already exist type errors. And any resource type published to the CloudFormation public registry exposes a standard JSON schema and can be acted upon by the Cloud Control API interface. So for all the third-party integrations, they're going to have to go through the CloudFormation public registry in the future to do that. And it's noted that the Cloud Control API is not aimed to replacing the traditional AWS service level API. They are still there and will always be there. And this is available to you in all regions except for China.
That's quite a mouthful. I remember.
Yeah,
I read it when the announcement was made, and I thought this kind of looks interesting. We're not quite sure why yet. What is this exactly? And I read it again a few days ago, and then again before the show. It's actually really, really good for a number of reasons. They kind of call out the users of them, the consumers of it, and what the intention was. I think that the first thing it does is it means that any additional AWS service now is just data in a Terraform provider. You don't need code changes. We don't need to call different APIs. There's just one place to go. Literally, if they add a new service, you just add that to your list of services that you recurse through and query with this API. And yeah, no code changes. No code changes is great. The other thing it does is kind of gives AWS a chance to have a bit of a do-over in terms of the inconsistencies that have been seen across things like CloudFormation, because the verbs that are used, not the verbs, sorry, the attribute names are a bit inconsistent between different types of resource. Sometimes it's list, sometimes it's describe, sometimes it's a bunch of different things, and it's a little bit all over the place. And this gives them a bit of a chance to sort of re-standardize the way their resources are addressed. I think it's awesome. I wish we'd had this a couple of years ago, because I have a service that needs to deploy infrastructure. I ended up having to call Terraform to do it for me because there was no sensible way to manage creating the resources and keeping track of state myself, that kind of thing. So something like this would have been invaluable, because now we could just call this. I also think, third most important use case is this is probably going to be a requirement for any new services that launch in AWS at launch time to have this integration with this service, which means that we would no longer be waiting weeks or months for new services to be available in CloudFormation. I think these will be now day one integrations with this service, so that you can start deploying resources using your own tools as soon as they're announced.
Yeah, well, I think you're right on that completely, because one of the challenges with CloudFormation, I think, was that they were a 2 pizza box team. And so, you built EC2, and then you're like, well, we want to get CloudFormation. You went to the 2 pizza box team and CloudFormation, and they became a huge bottleneck. And so by now standardizing this input-output format, they can actually now make this, you self-onboard to the service, which makes it, yes, you're right. It makes it so the service team that's building the new service has to now be compatible with this API, which is great. So yeah, I agree with you. I wonder, if they could do something similar to this for IAM, because IAM is a mess, kind of similar. Some of those sins you mentioned, like describe versus list. And we talk about all the time about how you can't figure out permissions that you need for different things, and the permissions change. Like there's some things they could do there as well. So I would love to see something like this expand out into potentially IAM in the future too.
That's actually interesting you mentioned IAM, because now you only need to give your deployment role, the Terraform gets credentials from, permission to call this API.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need permission to call any other API, only this one.
Well, you mentioned Terraform, and I talked about Terraform. So Terraform, of course, being a launch provider, they had a blog post as well. So they're talking a little bit about how what they're going to do with it. And so they're announcing the preview of their new AWS Cloud Control provider. So this is a brand new provider, which leverages the Cloud Control API with a goal to provide capabilities sooner and faster than ever before. Terraform points out that it provides an abstraction layer for resource providers to proxy through when interacting with AWS Service APIs. They're able to automatically generate the code base for the AWS Cloud Control Terraform provider. Generating the provider allows them to provide new resources faster, because they won't have to write boilerplate and standard resource implementations for each new service. And for now, HashiCorp recommends that you use a new provider to experiment with new services before they're added to Terraform AWS provider, as well as test the configurations in dev and staging, or build out proof of concepts to deploy in conjunction with Terraform AWS providers, such as Amazon AppFlow with Amazon S3, which they have a great example for if you're curious about. So Terraform is definitely a benefiter of this, because, not having to write those boilerplates and standards, that's going to be huge.
And API limits is another thing as well. Now we don't have CloudFormation or Terraform calling all these APIs. You deploy a massive Terraform stack, which makes, which could have hundreds of resources. That's an awful lot of API calls across a whole bunch of services. And I've definitely seen problems with API limits. And Terraform is pretty good about retrying. But if you have your application that also needs to call those APIs as part of its day-to-day operation, then you don't want a deployment interfering with the actual operation of your app. So now, by separating the deployment concerns completely in terms of security and limits from the application, it's only a good thing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it changes, because it definitely could be a big paradigm shift for a lot of things, which is great.
Hey everyone, Jonathan here. I just wanted to take a minute to thank the cloud consulting gurus at Foghorn for helping make the Cloud Pod possible. These folks truly get it. Cloud consulting experts since 2008, they are premier tier partners with AWS, Google Cloud Platform Silver, and Microsoft Azure partners. From multi-cloud to containers to moving full production workloads to the cloud under the tightest compliance, Foghorn's team of full-stack cloud engineers have been there, done that, gotten the t-shirt, and are ready to share their experience with you. If you're in the market for some talent to supplement your team, visit www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. Foghorn, the promise of cloud delivered.
All right, moving on to Lambda functions. If you've been out there loving those ARM-based EC2 instances with EC2 hosts and containers, but sadly missing them in Lambda, that's all changing today for you. New and existing functions can now be configured to run on x86 or ARM Graviton 2 processors. Now, this choice, you save money in two ways. First, your function runs more efficiently due to the Graviton 2 architecture, allegedly. Secondly, you pay less for the time that they run. In fact, Lambda functions powered by Graviton 2 are designed to deliver up to 19% better performance at 20% lower cost. Workloads with multi-threading and multiprocessing or performing many I/O operations can experiencing lower execution times at an even lower cost. That's particularly useful now that Lambda supports functions with 10 gigs of memory and 6 vCPUs. All Lambda runtimes will build on top of Amazon Linux 2, including the custom runtime, are supported on ARM, with the exception of Node.js 10, which has reached its end of life. So you should be on Node 12 or 14 anyways. Of course, binaries in your function packages would need to be rebuilt for the function code of the architecture you want to use, so don't just go switch the button without knowing what your code base does. And functions packaged as containers will, of course, need to be repackaged as either x86 or ARM. You can also create two versions of a function, one for x86 and one for ARM, and send traffic to the function via aliases using weights and compare the results in CloudWatch to see if it's helping you or not. And Lambda functions using ARM Graviton 2 architecture provide for 34% price performance improvements, with the 20% reduction in duration costs also applies when using provision concurrency, and you can further reduce 17% with a compute savings plan. So lots of savings for you in the Lambda space today.
Awesome. I think that the reason we get better performance for multi-threaded applications is because all the ARM cores are single-threaded themselves. There's no hyper-threading to worry about. So every core is its own full core, unlike on x86. Isn't it great? I mean, yeah, definitely some things to consider. You may think that your Python script is sort of ambivalent to whether it runs on x86 or not, but you'll be surprised how many packages when you install them actually do call C to build native code on the back end as you install them. So yeah, definitely have to be wary of the architecture. But I think multi-platform Docker images are around as well. So hopefully Amazon will support those as well and sort of intuitively switch the compute based on what's available in the container.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, how when Graviton 3 comes out, which, if I were to make a reInvent prediction, might be there. It's been a while since Graviton 2 came out. You had to wonder, how do these runtimes start changing and moving, and does that start changing some of these paradigms in the future too? So far, everything's runtime, so that's helpful.
Yeah, but 20% less cost. I mean, performance improvements. I could kind of take it or leave it a little bit. There are a few use cases where I really think I care about an extra 20% performance when you have I/O to consider.
Well, I mean, if you're doing serverless right, you are 1,000% correct. But if you're doing serverless wrong, where you're doing really long-running transactions, you do care that it's 20% faster because it's a big cost. There was actually interesting chatter in the FinOps Foundation Slack room a week or two ago. And they were talking, there was some presentation someone gave and basically saying if you ran a Lambda function for like 16 minutes, it's basically it costs you more than it would run on EC2. Which, you're right, if that's not what it was designed for, but they're supporting the use case if you have the need, but it is a lot more expensive. And so if you're doing Lambda in the bad way, you definitely should look at moving to ARM and doing it in a different way, or just moving to EC2, which would be much cheaper. Yeah. But if you're doing it in the right way, which is very event driven, very very rapid transactions, then I agree with you. I think it makes the savings of performance is not as important.
I like the FinOps Foundation and their mission. I think there's more to it than just that. I don't think you can just look at compute time and runtime. And yes, Lambda is more expensive than EC2, but I don't need to pay for an antivirus agent or a DLP agent or the overheads of patching and having to staff managing fleets of EC2 instances or dealing with maintenance events, or there's a whole bunch of things about EC2 which cost money, which probably don't get factored into that. And so, is Lambda still more expensive? Probably, but it's a whole lot more convenient. And I think the speed at which you can develop and deploy applications to Lambda is just far better than EC2. It must be worth an awful lot.
All right. Well, an announcement that I am still confused about. VMware Cloud is now available to you on AWS Outposts, bringing you VMware software-defined data center as a fully managed service on-premise. Of course,
Wasn't it always?
in 2017, AWS and VMware announced, of course, VMware Cloud on AWS. The VMware Cloud on AWS provides dedicated single-tenant cloud infrastructure delivered on the next generation of bare metal AWS infrastructure. At the time, it was Nitro because it was new, based on the latest American EC2 or Amazon EC2 optimized high I/O instances and featuring low latency, non-volatile memory express NVMe, which was also new at this time. And now VMware and AWS are bringing VMware Cloud to AWS Outposts deployed on Nitro systems-based EC2-based bare metal instances. With VMware Cloud on AWS Outposts, you can remove the overhead associated with designing, procuring, and managing IT infrastructure, thereby improving IT efficiency. And you get operational consistency with a single pane of glass in vCenter that allows you to manage your software-defined data center in the AWS regions, on VMware Cloud, on AWS Outposts, and in your self-managed on-premise VMware environment. And all I can think about this is you don't really understand what going cloud native is, do you? Digital transformation has been lost on you, and you're just moving your tech debt to the cloud. Or to an outpost in your private cloud, which is even worse.
I don't know where it's an interesting move of Amazon Web Services. I mean, effectively, they're going into data center commodity hardware to compete against Cisco or HP.
Which is funny to me because they say, this helps you eliminate the need to design, procure, and manage IT infrastructure. Well, but I still have to design and procure the outpost.
Yeah, I mean, it's great.
Go away.
Yeah. You don't need procurement people anymore. Just buy this. I don't know. I mean, I suppose there will be some people who want outposts. I mean, it's tied to region anyway. I don't know. I like outposts. I like the common control plane across my local data center and my cloud presence. I think that's of great value. I just don't understand why anybody would still want to keep their VMware presence around. I mean, I don't know. You can run EC2 locally on an outpost. Why add that additional layer of abstraction and deploy a software defined data center on an outpost?
You employ a lot of VMware engineers who don't understand.
It's already software
who don't understand
defined.
cloud APIs, and they don't want to change. And this is your way of getting them to change and get cloud without getting change, I guess.
But it's already a software defined data center. I mean, that's what Outpost brings you to begin with. I'm like,
it's control planes on top of control planes on top of control planes. Because you know what they're doing. They're going to take, going to put Outpost running my EC2 control plane. They're going to put in VMware running my VMware. Then I'm going to put Tanzu on top of that, which is going to be the announcement for sure at reInvent. That Tanzu has come to VMware on AWS, and so now I can run another control plane on top of all of this, and it's just control planes all the way down.
All right, we've got to find the first person to run Anthos on Tanzu.
On Tanzu, oh my god, that's
VMware
amazing.
On Outposts.
Yes, if you're that person, please reach out. We'd like to talk to you. I should also mention VMware is prominently featured by all three cloud vendors this week because it is VMworld this week, which we don't cover here typically. But all the cloud providers have VMware offerings, and so they all announced something new, or reminded you at least that they had a VMware service in the case of Oracle. So there you go.
But they're doing what they can to remain relevant. I mean, they're still the news. They haven't gone away. I think everyone imagined that VMware would be, if not long gone, then certainly well along the way at this point. But they're still here. They're still relevant. They're still making news, and they're still doing deals with these cloud providers. So
that's true.
Yeah.
It's as I think someone named Quinny Pig says on Twitter, tech debt or payroll processing tech debt company, VMware. Which is very true, very, very true in many ways, unfortunately. But it's be interesting to see kind of where it goes from here. I no longer feel it's the on ramp to the cloud that it once was. It does feel like hybrid is going to be here for a while to stay, unfortunately. Well, Amazon OpenSearch Service, which is, of course, the successor to Amazon Elasticsearch Service, which they put in the headline, which I can't wait to get to lightning round later with, announces support for cross-cluster replication. And OpenSearch now supports cross-cluster replication, enabling you to automatically copy and synchronize indices from one domain to another at low latency in the same or different AWS accounts or regions. With cross-cluster replication, you can achieve a high availability for your mission-critical applications with sequential data consistency. So there you go. You can replicate between clusters, which it was an enterprise feature that they couldn't support and offer to you until they forked. So there you go.
Yeah, and I already have a feature request in to allow me to replicate my own data from my own data center.
Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
or non-AWS OpenSearch cluster, because I already have a petabyte of data which I would love to synchronize out to something else and not have to manage this cluster. I think it's going to be challenging because there's keys involved which they're not going to want to expose to people. They don't want to expose direct access to the nodes in the cluster. You really only have access through a load balancer, which is not ideal for this type of workload. But no, this is great. I'd love to see them eating away and away Elastic Cloud and what Elasticsearch have provided so far. No bitterness.
No bitterness. None. All right. Well, let's move on to GCP. So this story actually comes to us from SiliconANGLE and CNBC, which are reporting that Google is cutting the amount of revenue it takes when customers buy third-party software on its cloud marketplace to compete better with Microsoft Azure. Under the change, GCP percentage goes down from 20% to 3%, which is the same apparently as Azure. Google has yet to confirm the change, so this is all allegedly. But when reaching out to Google, CNBC was told, our goal is to provide partners with best platform and most competitive incentives in the industry. We can confirm that a change to our marketplace fee structure is in the works, and we'll have more to share on this soon, most likely at Google Cloud next week. So that's where we'll probably hear about that. But yes, Amazon, I guess, is the last one standing with a 20% cut of all software licensing through their marketplace.
Oof. That's a big chunk of change.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much revenue it constitutes for some of these guys, but it'll be very interesting to see if Amazon also follows suit on that particular change.
Yeah, and I think that high price for dealing on the marketplace is why people like Elastico haven't been able to come to agreements with Amazon over providing sensible, licensing agreements.
All right. Well, moving on to workflows. Google Workflows is very similar to step functions in AWS. So let's start there because that's a good level set of where we're at with knowledge. With workflows, developers can easily orchestrate various services together on Google Cloud or a third-party API, and workflow connectors handle long-running operations of Google Cloud services till completion. And workflow executions can also wait for time to pass the built-in sys.sleep function till some computation finishes or some event occurs. But what if you need slow things like Jonathan to approve it? Or validation of like something in your system, or an external system like a fulfillment center or an inventory system that's going to notify you that products are back in stock. Instead of using a combination of sleep instructions and API polling, now you'll be able to use workflow callbacks. And with callbacks, execution of the workflow can wait until it receives a call to a specific endpoint and goes on its way. There you go. I think Amazon got this very recently too. This isn't revolutionary.
I mean, in a way, I'm surprised this didn't already exist. I don't know how they could have workflows that didn't have this type of functionality unless they literally always pass something from from one thing to the next thing and assume that it's always running, and there's no waiting around for an external event to happen. So this opens up a whole bunch of other use cases that perhaps you could have implemented previously. But it's pretty neat. I mean, it makes sense that you might have to wait for something to happen once in a while.
Always good. Well, here's the VMware announcement from Google. New features coming to Google Cloud VMware Engine, including auto-scaling and much, much more. So now I'll be able to spin up a new VMware ESX instance within 30 minutes. The VMware Engine can auto-scale, leveraging policy-driven automation to scale the nodes needed to meet the compute demands of the VMware infrastructure, which is actually kind of nice. I like this. But again, if you're doing VMware, you probably know you need more capacity and just will do it. But if you want to make it as a service through something like Tanzu, you might need this. Mumbai region is now available for VMware. If you were in Mumbai and wanted a VMware cluster, you can now get it. With new Google Cloud KMS integration now in preview, so you can use your KMS keys inside of VMware. It's now HIPAA compliant, and it now supports NSX-T support for Active Directory for all your logon needs, and vSAN trim and unmapped support for thin provisioning recovery. So those are all new things in the Google Cloud VMware engine at VMworld.
Nope, I got nothing. all I can think is maybe. I don't know. It's like running an ancient PC emulator or something just to experience what Windows for Workgroups was like on Windows 11. I'm like,
yeah. I mean, it's nice. These are good features. The KMS integration is a nice touch.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But again, is this really your end state for how you want to
auto scaling?
Cloud?
I mean, we already have auto scaling is almost table stakes for any kind of public cloud, and then they're just implementing auto scaling for a VMware cluster. Like it just no.
Well, I mean, in the Amazon space, you typically are buying VMware as like a T-shirt size. So I want a small cluster, a medium cluster, or extra large or large cluster. So there's really no auto scaling there either. So this is something revolutionary to what Google's doing in this space, because it doesn't exist as far as I'm aware in AWS. Although I've yet to use the VMware on AWS offering because everyone keeps telling me no. So
yeah.
Every time I mention it, everyone looks at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, no, don't do that. I'm like, but it can make this migration so much faster. No, don't do it.
I mean, the reason not to, though, you just all of a sudden you lose access to things like the metadata service and native access to Amazon services, and I would assume the same type of limitations apply if you run VMs through VMware on GCP as well. All of a sudden you lose all that sort of differentiated, amazing sort of layer that they add to VMs, and all of a sudden you have to start managing credentials externally, and it's just I don't know, a step backwards.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on to a step forward. Apparently, Google says that their customers are asking for new features in Cloud KMS, and one of those features they're asking for is improved transparency around their crypto inventory. The newly launched Key Inventory Dashboard, it now helps their customers more easily explore, search, and review keys used in their organization all from one place in the Google Cloud Console. The Key Inventory Dashboard provides you a comprehensive information about your crypto keys, details such as key name, creation date, last and next rotation dates, rotation frequency, and among many other attributes. And these insights are comprehensively presented in table form, which is always the way I like to get my reports, which makes it easy to sort and filter keys by various attributes. This is a compliance person's dream feature.
I was going to say, who the target audience for something like this is when it's in the console and it's in the tabular form.
Yes. And it's you can sort it and filter based on those tabs. Yes. I know exactly what this is for. So that's cool, and I do appreciate it. But the one next is kind of cool. New support for PKS number 11 standard to allow their applications to make use of Google Cloud cryptography. This will allow customers to access keys in Cloud KMS or the Cloud HSM via the PKCS number 11 V240 API, which is a better name. Additionally, they're announcing that this library is being made available as an open source project and will be welcomed to the community's contributions for possible inclusion in subsequent versions. So basically, they're allowing you to use all of their key management for anything you want to do as long as it supports this API, which is great. So, I mean, now I can get rid of my expensive HSMs. I can get rid of all my legacy BS. I can just use this. I like it.
Yeah, and that's good because now for dev environments, you can simulate those services without having to pay tens of thousands of dollars for them, because they're not cheap to spin up. Cloud HSM is not for the faint of heart.
I mean, I hope you're not using Cloud HSM for your dev environment.
No, but
KMS will do.
But in terms, in terms of consistent testing and sort of promotion of your application through different environments, you don't want to have different application code. You need a standard API to whatever the backend is for the key store.
Yeah, that's a fair way. I didn't think about it from that perspective. Like the code that you write to actually get the data out of HSM versus KMS is different. So that makes sense. The next one was something new to me. I didn't know this about the cloud. Variable key destruction and fast key deletion. Variable key destruction feature allows you to specify a length of time, 0 to 120 days, that a key will remain in scheduled for destruction state after a customer requests the key to be destroyed. This increased control and automation means customers can specify the destruction window that is right for them. This is really great for SaaS companies who, a customer cancels, but you don't want to delete the key for 60 days just in case they change their mind. So now you can, deprovision them and all the things you normally do, and then basically put a timer on it, which I appreciate because I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten to delete the key after we've already deleted the data, just because it was not part of my process. And the next part, the fast key deletion, which is rolling out in October, will assure customers that all remnants of their destroyed key material will be fully purged from all parts of the Google Cloud infrastructure. And this reduces Google Cloud's commitment from 180 days to 45 days. I did not know there was a delay here. I would not have guessed that, if I deleted a key in KMS or HSM, that it would not be removed immediately from all services in the Google world and cause me a massive outage within, I assumed, at least a day. But 180 days is a long time, and then 45 days is much better, but still a long time as well. And a new feature of that is that if you re-import the original data that created the key, it'll now allow you to restore access to that data. So yeah, that's nice too. So if I deleted it, and now you can re-import it, that's so helpful.
Yeah, it's got to be a big concern if you're encrypting, terabytes or more data with a key that you can delete with a single API call. I think that fast delete of keys though is, I would suspect that it's about meeting compliance requirements about deleting customer data, deleting personal data, because I think if you store, imagine tape backups going back years with customer data on. Now legislation allows consumers to request their data is deleted. It's completely impractical to go back and restore that data, delete a particular customer's piece of information, and then write it all back out to tape. And I think the same thing probably applies in cloud, where we're using object store, and we're sort of saving that out to like deep freeze type things for many years. In our finance industry, potentially 40 years, we have expiry dates on some S3 objects right now. But if a customer requests their data is deleted, we need to actually delete it. I think the fast deletion of the key material is sort of a different way to delete customer data. If you can prove that it's effectively gone, once that key material has been destroyed, then you can say, yes, within 45 days of request to delete your data, it's no longer accessible for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Just one of those things I didn't know. Never asked the question, never thought about it, just didn't know. Makes sense why it is that way.
Yeah, the good thing about things like AES is, if you look at an encrypted file, it should look like random data.
Mm-hmm.
And so you delete the key, it's effectively, it's effectively
that random data, because we have no way to make it not random data.
Yep.
Exactly. For listeners of the Cloud Pod, you know that I have no love for Microsoft Active Directory, which is why I'm excited to tell you about the leading cloud directory platform, JumpCloud. JumpCloud makes it easy to solve today's IT challenges by unifying device and user management through a single pane of glass, enabling you to securely manage your users and devices and perform common tasks like onboarding and offboarding remote workers. With JumpCloud, you no longer need to implement an on-premise Active Directory infrastructure or additional tooling to scope a user's access, and you can ensure that the user is coming from trusted devices and networks. Enabling JumpCloud's zero-trust solutions improves the security and compliance of your network, ensuring users have access only to the services they need when they need them. To start your organization's move to a modern, secure hybrid work model, try JumpCloud for free today at cloud.jumpcloud.com/thecloudpod. That's cloud.jumpcloud.com/thecloudpod. The last one from Google this week is if you need an inexpensive managed messaging for streaming analytics, PubSub Lite was made by Google for you. And Lite can be as much as 10x cheaper than PubSub. But until now, the low price came with a lot more work for you, which is what I always love seeing. Less capability for less money. You had to manage the read-write throughput of each partition of every topic. So if you had 10 partition topics, you needed to have 10 write and 10 read capacity utilization metrics, or you might run out of capacity, which is never good for your PubSub implementation, no matter if it's light or full. Google apparently didn't like this, and I'm sure they also got a lot of feedback from customers. And so they launched PubSub Lite reservations this week to manage throughput capacity for many topics with a single number. A reservation is a regional pool of throughput capacity, and the capacity can be used interchangeably for reading or write operations by any topic within the same project and region as the reservation. Think of this as provisioning a cluster of machines and letting it handle the traffic instead of a cluster is a single number. Not only is it less work, but you no longer have to specify the maximum throughput needed, resulting in lower costs. And depending on the variability of the traffic, this can mean that half or more of the capacity was idle, but still costing you money. As a cost-saving bonus, the reservations do away with explicit minimum capacity per partition. There is still a limit on the number of partitions per reservation, though. With this limit, you pay for at least 1 megabit per second per topic partition. And this is not quite scaled to zero, a PubSub, but beats the 4 megabits that was required for any partition prior to reservations. So there you go.
Awesome.
Talk about a feature like, okay, we want to make a more inexpensive version of PubSub. Like, why not just give me different like durability tiers and PubSub? Like, it's interesting they created this whole new light thing and then they added all this complexity to it. They now have a capacity plan, regardless of if it's a reservation or not. It's a bit like, give them the power of PubSub, because every customer is going to eventually get to the point where they need PubSub, is my guess, if they're successful. And so why make them implement on something they're going to change versus just turning a knob? That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, it kind of, I think it speaks to the implementation of these services in the cloud. Things like serverless, you pay per nanosecond or per millisecond, and it's very much a sort of a consumption-based model. Whereas some of these things, they must have infrastructure running in order to support this whenever somebody sends a message. Perhaps they could re-implement it in a serverless way in the future and still get performance. I don't know. It obviously isn't that today. And so I think this is really about sort of optimizing the way they deliver the service to you in a way that can help you reduce costs. Yeah, somebody complained.
Someone complained. All right, let's move on to Azure. You can now streamline your DDoS management with the new Azure Firewall Manager capabilities. Now supports managing Azure DDoS protection standard for virtual networks, and the support is now in preview for the Azure Firewall Manager. Of course, Azure Firewall Manager is a security management service, imagine that provides a central security policy for cloud-based security perimeters. Through Azure Firewall Manager, customers can automatically deploy a firewall to a virtual network or secured virtual hub. Azure DDoS, of course, protects you from DDoS attacks and is automatically tuned to protect all public IP addresses in virtual networks. Protection is simple to enable on any new or existing virtual network and does not require any application or resource changes. So they did a whole press release for basically simplifying the enablement of DDoS in a firewall manager. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
I find it interesting that the way we different providers speak about this type of thing, I think as you're referring to it as a firewall manager, as though a firewall were a physical thing in a way, is interesting. It kind of reminds me of a rack with a firewall device in it, whereas AWS doesn't speak in quite the same way. I mean, their firewall is their security groups and their what's those things that nobody uses anymore? The the rules between subnets and the VPC, and so there's no sort of pretense that it's an appliance that's being deployed. Whereas I think Azure still, I think it's a language thing, and I think they're still speaking to people who expect a firewall device to be there that they can plumb the traffic into, rather than sort of taking it for what it is, which is software that's routing network traffic.
All right, let's move on to NetApp Files. Are generally available. Well, they've been generally available since May of 2019. And they have significantly helped clients migrate and run some of the most important production workloads. But to get access, you had to get on the wait list, which I love being on a wait list. Don't you, Jonathan? It's so nice. But
generally available and having a wait list, it doesn't seem
it
like
seems a little weird, right? Like
haven't really jived together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Azure apparently agreed because they're now removing the wait list. And this makes Azure NetApp Files a first-party service in Azure, bringing together the 30 years of NetApp ONTAP innovation and Azure's networking and service management experience. So basically, it was generally available before, but it was a second-class citizen because now it's first-party. So that's why to get to second class, you had to be on the wait list. Over the 4 years that they've offered this service, since it was in beta in 2017, they've reduced costs by introducing 3 performance tiers, designed the service to meet or exceed the scale and performance requirements of large and performance-sensitive apps to large petabyte deployments, and achieved 4.4 gigabytes of throughput and consistent low latency as low as sub-milliseconds with full durability, all with the power of NetApp and Azure. Now you can get it without having to wait for someone to approve you on the list.
Yeah, so not only premium and ultra premium services, they have premium and ultra premium customers apparently.
Apparently so. And then I look forward to the future announcement of Azure Netapp Premium or ultra premium service files. That'd be great.
It's interesting. NetApp, another company like VMware, which is still managing to maintain relevance. And right now, maybe it's around sort of the comfort of doing migrations, and we use NetApp in the data center, so we want the same APIs or the same type of service or features in the cloud. I kind of wonder if they'll continue to evolve a little bit and provide value add over the cloud native file services.
I mean, so far they have, right? I mean, like until recently, NFS was still pretty problematic on AWS. Mm-hmm. Getting anything of size and performance was not great. I think the other thing that NetApp had going for it was that they embraced the cloud. They didn't put their head in the sand and say, "Oh, cloud's a fad. We're not going to buy into that BS. Just keep buying hardware." They acknowledge that, hey, it's a threat to us, and we can either partner with a threat and make something available that makes it easier for customers to be hybrid or move workloads between the two systems. And they did, and I think it was a good call. But I think other vendors who've embraced that are doing better than the ones that are kind of still stuck in the resell hardware business.
Yeah, and I really like NetApp for some of the features and services they offer. I mean, I think this tiered storage is fantastic, where you've got banks of fast SSDs for actively accessed data, and they slowly move that out to slower storage and even long-term storage in S3 or something, and it's all completely seamless to the application.
I mean, back, oh God, how many years ago was that? 20 years ago, 18 years ago, I had a really bad experience with NetApp. Yeah. And I kind of sworn off NetApp, and I was like, I'm never going to use NetApp again. I hate them. They're so awful. Like a lot of pain, a lot of outages, lots of issues tied to NetApp. And and I learned later on in life that there was reasons why we had problems with that company and the way we implemented it. that's a NetApp problem from 2004. But then in my last company where I worked with you, we had NetApps, a lot of them, petabyte scale. And I came to appreciate what they could do and their capabilities. And when you do it right and you architect it properly and you're not cheap like my company back in 2004, it can be amazing. And so I became a convert on the NetApp side, and I really like their cloud stuff. So people come to me and they're like, "Hey, I really need a scalable NFS solution for cloud, and I don't want to use a cloud native service. NetApp is my choice," and I'm okay saying that. So the check can be in the mail tomorrow. It's fine. They're not a sponsor, but maybe in the future they can be a sponsor. I'd love to have them. Yeah. All right. Well, we have Azure's VMware announcement because, again, VMworld. And they are letting us know that Azure VMware solutions are helping their customers move to the cloud across industries and sectors. The cost savings for VMware licensing alone was a big benefit since that included with the Azure VMware solution. Gaining that while eliminating needs for networking equipment, storage, hardware, and professional services deployments amounts to 6 figures of savings for the university, per Mary Lovo, Director of Cloud Infrastructure Services at the University of Miami. Which, is that just a translation of like, hey, I used to pay OpEx to VMware and I just pay it to Azure, or I have lots of Azure credits and so it saves me money? Like, I don't really know how that works, but hey, more power to you, Mary Lovo. I appreciate it. Since its launch on Azure, is bringing the VMware solutions out globally and is pleased to announce that they're adding Brazil South and East US 2 online with VMware solutions, providing it now in 17 regions. And the partnership has also added capabilities to the solution, including support for HCX Enterprise Edition, simplifying bulk live migrations from on-premises. As well as we talked about VMware SRM being added a couple weeks ago, HCX over SD-WAN, and the vRealize suite, all coming to you in the last few months on top of VMware. And there's more coming. More coming. So they're going to be adding to their VMware offering on Azure run commands from Azure VMware Solutions, allowing you to control vCenter from within Azure. New placement policies to simplify the process for admins to specify constraints or rules when allocating VMs within the Azure VMware service. Azure disk pools for Azure to provide persistent storage options so you can gain flexibility for your data needs. And something that we'll talk about in the next topic, as well as support for more partners than ever, including Citrix VDI and Azure VMware and Jetstream DR.
I do think that live migrations from on-prem to the cloud is awesome. I mean, I just no longer when you're doing these app migrations do you have to even worry about what that server is that Bob had running before he left 3 years ago, and nobody ever's rebooted because they're scared to touch it, kind of thing. Literally, just move your entire presence from VMware to the cloud and just leave it running as is. That's quite impressive, and it's a terrible strategy. But technologically, just being able to move a running machine like that is fantastic.
Oh yeah, I mean, the first time I ever saw vMotion in a demo, your head explodes. Like, it's such amazing technology at the time, and just like, oh my god, this is amazing. And then to basically be able to vMotion between your on-premise world and the cloud is also very cool. Maybe not as cool as the first time I saw vMotion, but still very cool.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the machine's not quite that busy, and as long as your storage is sensibly replicatable because it's not that busy, and vMotion works great when it works. Otherwise, I mean, obviously, machines just sit there for hours, not quite catching up, and the replication never finishes. So it's, I mean, I would imagine for most sensible use cases, it will be fine. Things like databases with high throughput, there are other ways of getting that data to the cloud without downtime, so you probably wouldn't really want to use it for things like that. But yeah, it's neat. But still, it's VMware. So we need to go and find the VMware stand at reInvent or something and say, what exactly is the play here?
You think they're going to tell us? They're going to be like, to help you, manage your hybrid workloads.
I'm like, come on, but really?
I mean, I'm pretty sure if you go back to the first reInvent, I think that was the first reInvent we recorded for the show. I think we pretty much talked about this as being the on-ramp to the cloud, and it's going to kill VMware, and I was wrong. It has not killed VMware. It's only strengthened them. It's all I can see.
Yeah.
Well, that thing I mentioned that we'll talk about in a second is, of course, the Azure Netapp Files data stores are now available for VMware solutions as well, coming very soon, which allow you to enable to create an NFS data store via the Azure VMware Solution Resource Provider API CLI with the Azure Netapp file volumes and mount the data stores on clusters of choice in the private cloud. Along with the integration of Azure disk pools for Azure VMware Solutions, this will provide more choice to scale storage needs independently of compute resources, as well as if you have VMware on-prem and VMware on the cloud, and you have NetApp on-prem and NetApp on the cloud, I can now replicate all of that, and I can even more automatically move vMotioning between the two places.
Yeah, I mean, nothing says performance like layering abstraction on top of abstraction from storage and expecting it to work properly. I mean, yeah. NetApp Files on Azure serving NFS VMDKs to VMware on Azure.
Well, we talked earlier about the complexity of how we get from Tanzu all the way down through VMware on Outposts.
Yeah.
The first time that someone ever explained to me how the file system works on a NetApp, I was like, oh, that explains a lot. Because if you're doing VMware, okay, so you're doing VMware on top of Fiber Channel. So if that's what you're doing on a NetApp, right? Basically, the Fiber Channel is a file that's on a LUN that's on the waffle file system. And on top of VMware, you have VMFS and VMDKs, and it's just like so much translation between the operating system and the actual block that happens in a NetApp filer, which is why I would not recommend a Fiber Channel implementation of a NetApp filer. But NFS is actually not too bad because you get the benefits of NFS and it being a native file system that's more native to the NetApp. So yeah, I don't particularly recommend the iSCSI or Fiber Channel use cases for the NetApps. It can work and it can do the job. It's just there's a lot of translation happening until you get to block, and so you will have performance issues. Guarantee it. Over a real SAN. That's all I'm
saying. Yeah, I moved from a SAN in Rackspace to I think it was iSCSI on NetApp. Worst
decision you ever.
Worst decision I ever made. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it works if your volume's not high, and it has some benefits, but it's just better choices. All right. Well, we don't have Peter and we don't have Ryan, so this is going to be a very unjudged lightning round. So we're just going to try to do the best we can. And so I think you're going to read the ones that I marked, and I'm going to read the ones you marked. Is that how this is going to work? Is that what our plan was?
Yeah, we can do something like that. And we can,
or I can just read it out and give my joke.
I could. You could do that.
You can do that too.
Well, we can. We'll kind of wing it and see how it goes. I did suffer last week from reading out some of the topics and being unable to withhold my comments partway through reading some of the press releases and things out. So nice. It's I try to get through the whole headline before making a comment. All right, AWS Lambda now supports triggering Lambda functions from Amazon SQSQ in a different account.
I mean, of all the things that you would want SQS and Lambda to do, this seems like the most obvious one, and only came to us 3 years late.
AWS announces AWS Snowcone SSD.
I mean, I prefer my snow cones not solid. That's just what I'm saying.
I kind of wonder if when they deliver them, that they're delivered on some crappy-looking white van with some nursery rhyme playing. Really,
that'd be awesome.
Looks like kind of a Libyan terrorist van from Back to the Future or something.
Yes. Announcing the release of Swiss-German dialect speech recognition support.
Finally, they can understand the Bond villains.
Yes, they can. AWS Step Functions support 200 AWS services to enable easier workflow automation.
If only it enabled easier use of step functions.
Or easier debugging, at least.
Introducing Amazon Redshift Query Editor v2, a free web-based query authoring tool for data analysts.
Because data analysts can't use a CLI. Perfect.
Google's released updated N2D VMs with latest AMD EPYC CPUs enable an average over 30% better price performance.
So epic. So epic. They didn't even get a new class of instance. Still N2Ds. So you get the confusion of, is it the 3rd generation N2D or is it the 2nd generation N2D? Thanks for that. Super epic.
Improve your Google security posture with new overly permissive firewall rule insights.
Which when you read this really quickly, like I was doing when I was doing the show notes, I was like, really? How does overly permissive firewall rules improve my security? And then you realize, oh, it's a analyzer ML thing, insights. You got to catch that insights word. Because the insight I had was like, this is a terrible plan. I don't know what they're thinking over there, Google. And if they can figure this out, then my firewalls will be much more secure.
And finally, Microsoft to launch Financial Services Cloud on November 1st, 2021.
I mean, this is really just here for me to gloat. Like, this prediction has been rock solid all year long. I'm so sad the year's almost over, actually, because I don't have something quite as awesome for 2022. So I got to start working on that.
Better hope to get those bugs patched before they do that, though. I'm not sure how many financial services companies want to put all their data into Cosmos DB. And
yeah,
right now it's severely undermined confidence.
That's true. That is true. All right. Well, that was a fun lightning round.
Well, I think I'll give you the point for that. In fact, maybe we should give us both of ourselves the point for that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
That's 16 for you, 12 for me. I think Ryan and Peter not showing up. They should.
Well, Peter doesn't get pointed anyways, but Ryan not showing up. That's All right. Well, we have things coming up once again. So we are very close to Google Cloud Next, October 12th through the 14th. We are not doing predictions because we decided we suck at Google Cloud predictions. And last year they announced nothing. So we are going with her announcing nothing this year too. So we're just going to go with that. We're going to say that you had to be, to get a prediction show, you had to be in person. That's what we're going to go with. So our new rule of thumb. If that doesn't excite you, HashiConf is October 19th to 22nd, coming up very quickly. And then the government summit for Google is November 3rd through the 4th. And Microsoft Ignite, November 2nd through the 4th. And AWS reInvent, still, last I checked, in person, November 29th through December 3rd in Las Vegas. So that's still happening. I keep checking the website regularly. I do have to be vaccinated, which I am, so that's good. So I can attend reInvent. Which I recommend you get vaccinated if you have not. And hopefully on Monday when the Facebook was down, you were able to do actual research versus your social bubble if you're anti-vax. But whatever floats your boat. So that is it for us here this week in the cloud. And do, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, please go out there and rate the show and share it with your friends. We love the support and we love doing the show for you guys, and we love seeing those reviews. So appreciate it in advance. Thank you very much. Have a great week, Jonathan.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye. And that is the week in the cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Foghorn Consulting and JumpCloud. Check out our website, the home of the Cloud Pod, where you can join our newsletter, Slack team, and send feedback or ask questions at thecloudpod.net, or tweet us with the hashtag #thecloudpod.